Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our assembly. Today is Monday, and it's the second week of our Adventures in My Garden project that you've all been working on in your Google Classrooms with your online learning. And you've been doing some fantastic work. Your teachers have been telling me all about it, and it's been really, really good to hear all about and to see. So, what we're going to do in our assemblies this week is we're going to think about the things that are in the garden, and we're going to talk about some of the specific things that we might find in our gardens. And today's assembly is about trees. Okay, so we're going to have a quick look around my garden. If you were paying really close attention while I was talking just then, you might have seen a bird flying past me. So the hedge behind me here is a laurel hedge. Okay, and you can often see it in gardens as bushes because you can prune a laurel, so you can cut it so that it stays in the shape that you want it. And this one, it's pruned so that it makes a really nice thick hedge. But if I was to prune away all of the branches down at the bottom, it would look like trunks of a tree, and then you'd end up with the shape up at the top. Or I could prune it into a particular shape. I've also got other plants in the garden. Let's have a look around this way. We've got a nice bamboo, and this, what can we see here, is a very, very small monkey puzzle tree, and these are really, really slow growing, and they get to be absolutely huge. And this one, we've got an umbrella shaped tree, so it kind of cascades down like that. It's dangles down to make that umbrella shape, and in the corner we've even got, I wonder if you can see what type of tree that is. It's a fir tree, like you would see at Christmas. So we've got a range of trees in the garden. I'm going to tell you a story about trees now. It's not about a garden as such, but it's about trees in the garden. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about trees at the end. So I'm going to tell you a story. You need to listen really carefully. And there's a particular type of picture in this story, and the pictures are woodcuts, and woodcuts are a type of art print. And artists carve pictures or patterns onto a piece of wood and then cover it in ink and press it onto paper or cloth to create the print. So here we go. All of the assembly material today has come from the Woodland Trust charity, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Woodland Trust charity at the end of this. Okay, so that's 100 years ago, there was... Hold on a moment. That's better. I couldn't see my notes to begin with. So, 100 years ago, there was a man called Jean Paul who went on a long walk through the hills of southern France. Can you see him in the picture? Look very closely. There he is, just on the path. The land wasn't very green. In fact, all he could see growing in these bare hills were scrubby bits of wild lavender and little else, and certainly there were very few trees. Now, tired from his long morning's walk, Jean-Paul came to a village. And here's Jean-Paul. So, unfortunately, he soon realised the village was deserted. The ruined houses huddled together and silent. There were no roofs to give protection from the cruel wind that was blowing, no trees to shade him from the sun, and the natural spring where the villagers used to get their water had dried up. He'd had no water to drink since the previous day, so he walked on. He was very thirsty. After 5 more hours, he spotted a lone shepherd looking after his sheep. The shepherd had a weather-beaten but kind face and a gentle manner. He gave the stranger a drink from his water bottle, then invited him to share some of his soup. The shepherd's name was Alziard. They entered the shepherd's stone house, and Jean-Paul soon forgot the bleak and wild landscape outside. The house was clean, neat, friendly, and warm. It was a safe place to rest for the night before carrying on with his journey. After they'd eaten, Alziard fetched a little bag and emptied a pile of acorns onto the table. Then he began carefully separating the good acorns from the bad ones. When he collected a large enough pile of acorns, he divided them up into groups of 10. And once he'd sorted out 100 perfect acorns, he stopped and went to bed. The next day, after taking care of his sheep, the shepherd took the little bag of acorns and dipped it into a bucket of water. Then off he went. Curious to see what Alziard was going to do with the acorns, Jean-Paul went with him. Soon Alziard began making holes in the ground. He put an acorn into each hole and covered it with soil. Jean-Paul realised the shepherd was planting oak trees. He watched as the shepherd planted all 100 acorns with great care. Alziard told Jean-Paul he'd been planting trees in the wilderness for 3 years, and in that time he planted a total of 100,000 acorns. The shepherd said that when he first came to the area, he noticed this part of the country was dying for the lack of trees, and having nothing better to do, he decided to put things right. Jean-Paul thanked the shepherd for his kindness and continued on his journey over the hills. 10 years later, 10 whole years later, Jean-Paul returned to the area. Can you guess what it looked like? Stop and have a think for a moment, pause the video, and tell the person you're watching this with what you think you might have seen. What do you think? Here's what it looked like. And this time when he reached the deserted village, Jean-Paul could see the previously barren landscape had been transformed by small trees. So that is what a young forest looks like, he said to himself. He then saw the shepherd in the distance. They walked to where the carefully selected acorns had been planted all those years ago to see the young oak trees. They were taller than both of them. Over the next few years, the young trees continued to grow and grow until the area became a wonderful green forest. Families with children started returning to the area, and the wildlife came back too. Instead of rough gusts of wind blowing over an empty landscape, there were soft and scented breezes, the wind in the trees sounding like running water. Indeed, water did flow once again from the springs that were previously dry, and people repaired the ruined houses. Hope returned, and the area grew healthy and prosperous, all because of the man who planted the trees. What a fantastic story! I really like that one. Now, there's a lot of trees that he planted. He took, how many acorns did he take out that day when Jean-Paul met him? How many acorns did Alziard take out? Can you remember? He took out 100 acorns to plant 100 trees. Now, interesting fact about oak trees, an oak tree, if it's left alone to grow and not chopped down, and nothing gets done to damage it or disturb it, have a guess at how long it's going to live for. Do you know? An oak tree will last, on average, if it's not disturbed, for 900 years. So it spends its life in 3 parts. In the first part, the oak tree spends 300 years growing to its full size. And it just grows and grows and grows and gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it reaches its full size. In the second part of its life, for the next 300 years, it will just be an oak tree, and it will grow, and there will be acorns, and there will be new trees growing, and birds and animals will live in its branches. And then over the final 300 years of its life, it slowly begins to lose its strength and its vitality, and it will spend those final 300 years not being quite as strong as it was and eventually dying. And it's only the very oldest oak trees that last for that 300 years. That full 900 years. So why do you think there aren't many 900-year-old oak trees around? What do you think? And it's actually because of us, because of people. Because if you think about 900 years being a really, really long time, during that time people look at the oak tree going, well, that's in the wrong place, I need to build a house there, or I need to build a road through there. So they get chopped down, which is why we start thinking about our global goals with life on the land. So what we're going to do now is we're going to think a little bit about the Woodland Trust charity. Now, I don't think that you, or your mums or dads, or whoever looks after your garden, could plant 100,000 oak trees. It's way too many, and you would have no space in your garden. But I think that we could look after the things in our garden so that we could have birds and all sorts of other animals and insects living there. And if you listen carefully, you might hear some of the birds that are in my garden while I've been talking to you. So let's have a think about the Woodland Trust charity. Now, as well as planting trees, the Woodland Trust looks after 1,000 woods throughout England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. They're all free to visit and they're fun to explore. It might be that you go on a class trip or a picnic with your family when we're able to come out of our lockdown. And the Woodland Trust also fights to protect ancient woods from being cut down and buildings, roads, train tracks or airports being built on top of them. And if you look really, really closely at the picture, you can see this oak tree is so big that there have been bits of wood as support, so these massive branches don't fall down under their own weight, because that's one of the other reasons that an oak tree will die, is that it gets so heavy it can't support its own weight. Ancient woods are very, very special and important for lots of plants and animals. And in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, ancient woods are really old woods that were around at the time of Queen Elizabeth. That's the first, and that's 400 years ago. In Scotland, they're woods that can be traced back to 1750 AD. That's over 260 years ago. Their secret is the special soils that have developed over hundreds of years. There's a unique mix of creepy crawlies, fungi, seeds and other things that help many plants and animals survive. And once they've been destroyed, these soils can never be replaced, so it's important that we look after our ancient woodlands. Now, the Woodland Trust does this because trees and woods are just brilliant. Woods are a great place to spend our spare time. They change throughout the seasons, providing many spectacles for us to enjoy, like these beautiful bluebells. You might have some of those in your garden as well. They're a fun place to explore and good places to exercise. Trees and woods are also fantastic for wildlife because they're shelter, shade, habitats and food. Have a think. What animals do you know that live in the woods? Tell your grown-up. Now, those same animals might well visit your garden. They might be a little bit more rare, so you might see at night, you might see a badger out in the woods if you're very, very quiet and you don't scare it. But you might not see a badger in the garden. But a lot of these animals and birds, like squirrels or sparrows or crows or starlings, you might well see in the woods or in your garden, which is why we're talking about the trees today. So woods and trees clean our air. They absorb carbon dioxide, which is a gas that we produce when we breathe out, and they produce oxygen, which is the gas that we use when we breathe in, and it helps our muscles to move. It's very, very important. And woods and trees provide shade from the sun. They soak up the sunlight and cool the air through their leaves, and this helps cool the planet down and reduces the effects of climate change. And it might be that if you've got a big tree in the garden on a hot sunny day, you'll sit underneath it in the shade thinking, oh, what a lovely place to sit and stop. Now, trees and woods drink up water through their roots. They help reduce the impact of flooding by acting as water reservoirs and stabilising the soil. They can also delay and slow down the flow of water. So on a very, very rainy day, like we had some very, very rainy time over the winter, and our playground was flooded, where you've got trees, the trees will drink up that water. So they actually help with flooding. And if your garden was very, very wet, it would have been the trees and the plants in your garden that would have helped to absorb some of that water and some of that moisture. Trees also provide us with timber and wood products. So I reckon you've probably got some things in your house that have been made from wood. So have a think about what they might be. Okay, now we might not want to be chopping down trees in our garden for wood, but that's why forests are chopped down, because it's a bit like farming. I went to Delamere Forest a few months ago and saw there was a big open space that had been chopped down and there were no more trees there. And it's actually because the wood had been used, the trees had been chopped down so the wood could be used in building products. So trees are also a source of renewable fuel. So the fuel source doesn't release or take up carbon dioxide. It's carbon neutral because we can grow the trees again and again and again, plant more and more and more trees, which means that it's environmentally friendly. And woods and trees don't belong just out in the countryside. Like we said all the way through, they're really important to people in towns, cities and villages too. They absorb air and noise pollution, and their shade helps keep urban areas cooler. So, we can say that life is better with trees. And just like these children are doing here, your job for today is to go hug a tree. Okay? I want you to go and hug a tree in your garden. Or it might be that you've got trees growing on your road, or it might be that you go for a walk somewhere with mum or dad or your family somewhere, and there are trees where you go for a walk. Okay, so there are lots and lots of wonderful things that trees do, and your job this week after this assembly is to go hug a tree and say thank you for all of the good things that the tree is doing. And if mums and dads want to, we'd love to see the photos on the Facebook page of all of the family, including mums and dads, hugging the trees and saying thank you. Okay, have fun doing that, because it's just a bit of fun, and it's something nice that we can do as well. It's good to be outside. So there we go, guys. We've got assembly on Tuesday with the Picture News team, and it's going to be a really interesting one this week. My assembly is going to be on Wednesday, and then the assembly on Thursday is a really fun one with a really nice sing-along with the Oaks National Academy, and then my assembly will be on Friday. Okay, now one last thing is that next week our assembly theme will be about happiness, okay, and ways to be happy. So what I'm going to ask all of you to do, and this has been in the school newsletter and we'll put it on Facebook and all sorts of other things, is I would like you to send me a photo of something that you do at home that makes you happy, and we're going to put it together in a big long video that shows everybody at school being happy. We'll put some cool music with it, and then we'll share it with you in the assembly of that week. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to think, what is there at home that makes you really happy? It might be being with mum and dad, it might be baking in the kitchen, it might be climbing a tree, it might be something you've done during the lockdown. You might have camped out in the garden, or done one of the multi-flex challenges. It could be that you've learnt a new skill, you've learnt to play the ukulele, or you've sat and really enjoyed a good book. And there's some people who are reading lots and lots and lots at the moment. So get somebody at home to take a photo of you doing that. Could be the whole family, could just be you. It's entirely up to you. And then email it, and there's a special email address for this. It's happy@winchamcp.cheshire.sch.uk. happy@winchamcp.cheshire.sch.uk. And send just one photo from your family into that email address, and then we will put them all together as a video so that we can all see, and hopefully all the teachers will be doing it as well. Okay, so you can see what makes them happy too. Okay, there we go. All right, so go hug a tree, send me a photo of you hugging a tree on the Facebook page, and I will see you for our assembly on Wednesday. Bye bye.